Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is Summit on Site, an interview series with speakers from Atlassian Summit in fabulous Las Vegas. I'm here with Mike help me out, Maheu from Go2Group, and we're going to talk today about the journey to the cloud. It's great to have you here, Mike.
Thank you.
Is this your first summit? No.
No, this is my 9th summit.
Ninth summit. This is my 7th, so technically you should be interviewing me, I think is what that means. Tell me a little bit about your role at Go2Group.
I'm the Senior Vice President of Professional Services and Operations, so I basically run all of our services and our cloud operations and cloud services.
Okay. And then as a larger, as a company, what exactly are the problems that Go2Group helps customers solve?
It's really simple, even though things change, and they've changed over the years as far as technology is concerned. I mean, Go2Group helps medium to large companies develop software better. It's as simple as that, through best practices, tooling, and basically coaching and help.
Cool. So I understand, based on the content of your talk, that you're a big booster of the microservices.
I am.
Cool. How do you know that microservices are right for your company? At Atlassian, we tend to think that if it's a very small team of maybe 50 people or less, it's kind of hard to justify the time and cost involved in switching over. But what are some of the, litmus tests that you use?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest impact is the organizational impact. And as far as, large company or a small company, I mean, you could consider the organizational impact maybe a bigger impact on a larger company, actually. I mean, the way I see it is, these days, everybody's agile now. We get that, and we can iterate and we can develop. But where we see companies struggling is delivering. They're struggling with delivering as fast as they can develop, and also delivering with precision. And I think there's a lot of aspects with DevOps that are evolving that we talk about that coincide with microservices architecture.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I agree with it has to be a big company, but there are definitely impacts, specifically around organizational and culture impacts on the company.
Okay. Well, one of those cultural impacts that we've seen trending is this movement towards kind of a you build it, you run it approach. So for an IT team in particular, as the lines between dev and ops blur, what's your feeling on skills that IT and software professionals in each of those roles need to build to be successful and frankly employed in the future?
Yeah, it's totally changing. It's kind of funny because I don't want to date myself, but I started out as a Java programmer. And back then, I used the word programmer. I think we use the word developers now, right?
Yes, sorry, you just dated yourself.
Yeah, programmer is old school. But back then, programmers or developers really didn't understand what they were deploying to or how to configure Tomcat or how to configure any environment. They were really just focused on coding. And we've kind of come full circle with that, but at the same time, what we look to or for at Go2Group is we really look for what we call today full stack developers. They're developers that understand cloud, they understand infrastructure, automation, Docker, and all these technologies. And that's really and then we can go into the microservices thing, but that's really what we need skill sets on and companies need in order to meet the demand of getting your application out to your audience as fast and as precise as you can without having accidents.
Sure. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and really drill down into this cloud thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you talk about being about how cloud native is being really about how the application is built, not necessarily where they're going or where they're going to be deployed to.
Right.
So at a high level, what in your mind are some of the key elements that make up a cloud native app?
Sure. Yeah, it's not that cloud means we're going to the cloud, because a lot of companies are doing some sort of business in the cloud. In the cloud, I don't really like the word cloud, whether it's AWS or Azure or even private cloud on OpenStack. It doesn't really matter. We all know we're going there. Maybe we're deploying to there, but it's really about how we are building our software and the automation that we're using and how we're deploying our software and what we're deploying it into to the cloud is what really makes us be cloud native. So it's the preparation and the deployment and the automation. So some of the three key things would be DevOps. You need to be practicing CI/CD, and have some automation as far as how you're building your application, how you're packaging it. And then you need to be agile. You need to still be practicing some agile methodologies. And then finally, you're probably going to want to be using some sort of containerization, whether it be Docker or something like that, and deploying your application to a modern platform like Kubernetes or Docker on cloud.
Okay. Now, you talked about CI/CD and build pipelines, and I used to work with Bamboo, and I used to be a test automation engineer myself. Now, when I was writing test code and working with continuous integration, this was before like continuous deployment was even a thing.
Right.
I just dated myself. What we would build tests at pipelines that went out to the not cloud.
Right.
So how has cloud-bound applications, like how has that changed the way that developers are building build pipelines and looking at automated testing now?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's where the roles are changing slightly or splitting, but it's really the way that the applications are either going to be a monolith or they're going to be a microservices type architecture where they're split up. It's kind of like we're breaking things apart. So when we all did the agile transformation, we went from large, bulky requirements and being interpreted by development to breaking them into pieces. So we're now looking at it, how we deploy our code and how do we do it faster. And we do that by breaking the architecture of the application apart into modules, if you will, that are focused on specific business functionality. And what that means is we can then break up the teams and create pipelines that are specific to that module of the application. That speeds things up. It isolates aspects of the application and allows you to do CI/CD and deploy to different environments, having them be isolated and not affect the entire application.
Oh, yeah, that was always a big pain point. Like, oops, totally broke the whole thing. Sorry, everyone's working on Saturday.
And we're not just talking about web applications anymore. We're talking about mobile. We're talking about AI. We're talking about chatbots, blockchain. There's so many different aspects to that's accessing your business logic.
Totally.
So that's why the cloud and the technologies around the cloud, they're meant and they're built to support this type of architecture and this type of automation.
One of those emergent technologies is Kubernetes, which you just mentioned. Now, for the folks watching who may not be savvy to the Kubernetes yet, can you give a little elevator pitch on what that is?
Well, so one of the things that happens when you go microservices in cloud is that the complexity increases. Every time you run a pipeline, you do CI/CD, you may be deploying 6 or more containers in many Docker images throughout that pipeline. So you end up with a lot of containers and applications and things deployed all over your landscape. In order to kind of rein that in, Kubernetes was created, which is a platform to manage how you deploy, provide governance around your cluster, and allow you to monitor your applications, the containers themselves, and the services, all the way to like security and scanning containers, scanning your application, all during this CI/CD process.
Awesome.
And so Kubernetes just helps you manage the complexity, really.
Oh, I can see why that's become such a popular technology.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty much the de facto management of containers on the cloud today.
Nice.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I want to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk culture.
Sure.
So, what are some of the cultural aspects that make teams successful in this new cloud-native world? Frameworks, communication methods, tech stacks. What is helping teams perform at their highest level right now?
I think it's the culture itself. It's how the teams are. It's what I call team dynamics. So the teams are being split up across the services. Then you have front-end developers, and they're focused on specific parts of the application. So there's clarity first of all. So the teams are more focused, and then there's the access or the aspect of deploying each microservice separately and having that be able to go to wherever you're going, to Amazon or cloud. But I think the biggest thing, culture shift, is that, like you said earlier, it's the skill set, because it's not DevOps. It's almost like Dev and Ops, and it's almost like no Ops, because the developers are doing what we call infrastructure as code. So they're basically building this dynamic infrastructure, these containers and their Docker images during the CI/CD pipeline phase. And then operations is now more focused on the cloud itself, the Kubernetes cluster, the governance around how things are deployed, the performance, and the monitoring and the logging and all that. So there's definitely some shifts in roles, organizational impact as far as that's concerned. And then it comes full circle to when you're running an application with a high audience and you have different aspects like web and mobile and all these things, it's constant feedback. So we have like Ops Genie, and you have, when you get things into production, there's so many different ways that users can get feedback back to you.
Sure.
And that's the speed thing. That's where we want to react to what the users are saying and get changes out quickly. And that's where this all helps.
Awesome. In the moment or two that we have left, is there anything that you want to add? Any nuggets that came out in the discussion after the Q&A after your talk?
I just think there's some questions about serverless and things like that. My advice is to take baby steps, and I think a lot of companies are already doing automation. It's like we get agile, they're starting to do CI/CD, but just take baby steps and start out with containerization, work with Docker a little bit, and then move on to the next framework or the next technology as you go, and just kind of build it as you go, kind of thing.
They say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. What I'm hearing here is that the journey to the cloud begins with a single container?
A single or a baby step to containers. Baby steps to containers.
Wow, baby steps to the baby steps. Awesome. Well, Mike, I'm so glad that you joined us. Folks, if you want to learn more about the cloud, check out the technology section of the Atlassian blog. His talk is also going to be recorded, available online soon or possibly now. But yeah, come over to the Atlassian blog, now branded as Work Life. Check out the tech section and keep watching.